We're the Young Indie Chroniclers podcast, and we're producing a new feature-length documentary, George Lucas, The Lost Golden Age.
Those 4 years in there was the happiest period for Lucasfilm.
We're thrilled to report Rick McLaughlin has agreed to sit with us for an all-new exclusive interview just for this documentary. We're also in contact with other key figures from the period, including Ben Burt, Jonathan Hales, and many others who played an enormous part in bringing this era to life.
We built a Kickstarter campaign to support the film. Join us now on this adventure at Kickstarter.com.
Hello there. Welcome to Force Ghost Conversations. This podcast is your home for cozy deep dives into all things Star Wars and Lucasfilm-adjacent properties. This is your host, Anthony King, and each week I will be joined by fans, creators, and believers in the principles from the galaxy far, far away to discuss the thematical elements from our favorite Lucasfilm properties. And without further ado, it is time to gather around the campfire for some Force Ghost Conversations. Welcome back to another installment of Force Ghost Conversations, everybody. This is a concluding episode to our Tales of the Empire series, where we are talking about the Barriss Offee arc from that show, and Greg McLaughlin from the Rebel Base Card podcast. The consummate professional himself joins the show so that we can have a great conversation about this arc, and frankly, even change some of my viewpoints originally coming into this thing too here. So I hope you enjoy that on the other side of the segment here, but this is where we would typically do Cloud City Gossip, which is where we cover the news and whatnot of the Star Wars and Lucasfilm-adjacent galaxy in the past week. However, it was a pretty low news week here. So that is frankly all that I have for this portion here. Whatever is news next week, we'll certainly cover, or anything that happens in the interim here. We'll touch upon that here, but I'm sure as the holiday season starts ramping up, that offices are starting to slow down their input and output as we get closer to that season then. So folks, that is all for this portion of the episode. I hope that you enjoy our talk with Greg McLaughlin about the Barriss Offee episodes from Tales of the Empire. Welcome back to Force Ghost Conversations, everybody. Thrilled to have another insightful conversation about Tales of the Empire here, so I can finally get off of that proverbial whiteboard that we talk about on the podcast all the time here. It's been sitting on there for a couple years now, and we're finally tackling the second part of the Tales of the Empire series, talking about the Barriss Offee arc, the Barriss Offee episodes of that series. And we have a guest, a pinch-hitting guest coming on the show today. He's coming in on short notice for this, but we're really appreciative of that. And we have Mr. Greg McLaughlin from the Rebel Base Card back on the show to chat about these fun episodes. Greg, how you doing? And welcome back to the podcast.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me. And yeah, I think it's nice to know, like, I have folders on my desktop of my laptop that have shows that I need to finish up. And I'm glad to know there's somebody out there, whether it's a whiteboard, whether it's something there that go, you know what, these things need to be discussed. These things need to be finished. I need to clean my slate. And it was fun to go back and revisit Tales of the Empire, you know, especially as I'm kind of in the midst of trying to chew through Visions season 3. So it was a nice palate cleanser of like actual canon versus the sort of canon.
Agreed. Yeah, we were talking off air, folks, and it is fun to, talk about something that's actually like the story of Star Wars. Like, if you were to check a guidebook and it was like a through line of like events on a timeline that happened, this would be in there versus those offshoots that we've been privy to lately, which are including Rebuild the Galaxy and, of course, the newly released Visions Volume 3. And I think it's always good to recenter ourselves with some of those what if conversations that are constantly circulating about, and especially as we talked on your show a couple weeks ago about the hunt for Ben Solo and all that, and just the stuff that's hanging out in the ether of like, these films are possible and whatnot. So it's like finally cool to talk about something concrete again in the Star Wars galaxy here too. And this was a one that people have been, clamoring for quite some time here, right? This Barriss Offee continuation of her story. This iteration also features stuff about Morgan Elsbeth too. But I think fans have really, especially since the Clone Wars, have been asking for more Barriss Offee. Like anytime like something comes out, I think especially with Rebel season 2 with the second sister, I want to say, that character that's basically the same species. People are like, is that Barriss Offee? Is that Barriss Offee? So we were kind of on Barriss Offee watch for quite some time there, and then Dave's just been, I feel, been teasing us for many moons about this character, knowing that the fan interest and speculation has been there. But I want to start with your journey with this character. Perhaps were you one of the people that were like, hey, I need a conclusion, what happens to her? Is she an inquisitor? Is she is she just rotting in a jail cell for the rest of time? Like what is the deal here with Barriss Offee?
I think the word you used in your prep was clamoring, and
Yeah.
that's where I kind of felt like, oh, I think I've got the tone of where he's thinking with this. I would say with Clone Wars, I started with Clone Wars when it first came out, and I kind of lost a little bit of interest. Of course, it comes right after Revenge of the Sith, and so you're like, oh, this is kind of done, and it wasn't, I think, until it hit Netflix, and then I started watching Rebels. I think Rebels was a nice way of trying to reintroduce, and then seeing some of those characters that I hadn't really, knew a lot about, going back into Clone Wars. And so, I think I came to that storyline of where, she kind of frames Ahsoka for like some sabotage, and then you find
Right.
out at the end that she's really kind of not turned to the dark side, but she really is questioning what's going on.
Mhm.
And I think I just kind of, I came to that rather late, and then just kind of like, all right. But I think what I like about the vibe of what the Tales episodes do is that, unlike say with Rebuilding or with Visions, where they can kind of go off and tell their own stories, these can pick up, especially with Morgan Elsbeth, characters that maybe we didn't get a chance to visit to, whether it was, live action or not, and then kind of go on a little bit. I mean, I don't know if anyone was really, to use your word, clamoring for a Yaddle story, but I think it was an interesting tie-in to Count Dooku, and so I liked that one. I think the one that maybe didn't hit as hard was the Ahsoka's mom one. Surprisingly
Okay.
enough, some of these, and I think with season 3 with the Cad Bane one, because it was so kind of a paint by numbers Western, which was
Got
the
it.
intent, that it didn't really get me as much as some others did. But with Barriss, I thought she was an interesting character. She had kind of a, you know, she definitely had a point of view, and I liked where they took it. And of course, I'm all about the Inquisitors. And
Mhm.
so
Mhm.
anytime we go back to the Inquisitor Clubhouse, I was like, yeah, I am all on board. I want more Inquisitor stories. So it was an easy in, and I thought it was a good arc overall.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I think overall you get a good story in this thing here. I'll admit I wasn't one of the people that was really clamoring for it. I was kind of like, it was one of those fun jokes of like, will they ever get to it? I don't know. Well, I'm sure they will at some point, but I'm not going to be one of those people that's like breaking down doors to be like, where's my Barriss Offee content, folks?
Right.
But at the same rate, I do find interest in what the character represents as this foil to Ahsoka a little bit here, this alternate voice on things. I mean, she's the reason why Ahsoka is pushed to leave the Jedi Order. Maybe she was thinking about it beforehand, right? You just don't make that choice overnight per se, but because of the proceedings that happen in the events of that closing arc of season 5 of the Clone Wars, that really pushes her up the edge to realize that, like, wow, the Council will push me aside for their own needs and gain when the time arises, right? Like, I'm just another pawn in the system, and I need to find my own place in here. And Barriss is also, I think, trying to find that too. Like she maybe discovers that a little sooner there, as she kind of is like this major talent Padawan, right? Also that experiences these types of like setbacks, perhaps, and then realizes that the nurturing necessarily isn't there from the Jedi Order at that time, and then realizes like, wow, I need to expose the hypocrisy of them in this moment here, and then she's in a jail cell, and then it's like, okay, great. Well, what happens next? There, and then with Disney buying the Star Wars property and announcing 1,000 projects that since then, right? It was interesting that they took them arguably this long to get there, but
Hmm.
I knew that this would be a storyline that they just weren't going to leave hanging, whether it be through this format, which I think is a great way to redo this, or not redo this, but to reintroduce the character, I guess, in a different format, But also to, they could have done a book or a comic or something like that, right? I don't think maybe a TV show or a movie would have been the place for this, but I think with the advent of streaming and whatnot and the need for content on this, then this was a great avenue for them to continue the story here. But I want to get into the first episode here of this, which is really specifically, all right, we're taking her from the jail cell that I aforementioned, and now we're taking her into the story of the Inquisitorius here. So it highlights the ritual of becoming new inquisitors, securing those people into that position. I think is a question that many of us have been wondering about since they were introduced in that first season of Star Wars Rebels, and we've gotten more ancillary content along the way too. What did you make of that process when you revisited this time, and maybe even when you watched it the first time? Perhaps what were your thoughts on just like seeing the formation of this new group of dark side baddies?
I knew that I had the Darth Vader series Charles
Yeah,
Soule
that
put
Soul one is
together
really good. Yeah.
that does deal with some of the early parts of the Inquisitorius, and especially with the Grand Inquisitor, which I kind of loved because I wanted to see, coming off of Rebels, I wanted to see more of that, and I thought I liked the beats that it did because at the beginning, when he's telling everybody, it's like, you need to stay here. It's like, all right, which one of you idiots can follow instructions? All
Yeah.
you got to do is just stay put. And of course, we see the one that kind of, like, all right. And the second one where, it's this, hey, we've got one slot. We've got one slot. We got
Yep.
we got one helmet made, right? And so one of y'all get it. We don't care who. And I think that does demonstrate that, hey, this is cutthroat. You've got to, what is a better test than basically going, all right, you're gonna have to take one of yourselves out, and that's it. But I also like, with the Grand Inquisitor, about him fighting by not fighting, because that is it does pay off very nicely. But also kind of shows that, and you see that with Ezra in the Ahsoka series, where he doesn't need a lightsaber. It's like it's a great payoff, and so I was all about it. We see the Inquisitor Clubhouse under construction, as it were. We know it's finished by the time of the Obi-Wan Kenobi series, and so I thought it was really nice. You saw, I think, some of the clones in sort of some transitional armor. So I was all about it, and and of course we got to see the one Inquisitor from Ahsoka, and I forget the
Merrick.
name. Merrick, yeah. So probably a very much alive Merrick at this point. And
maybe
there was maybe we don't know. I'm not here to judge.
It's a nice
your life
tease.
or not.
Yeah,
a nice tease. So there was just a lot of opportunity here, but I really did like it.
and if I'm not mistaken, too, there'll also be the Inquisitor that we see in the Tales of the Empire Ahsoka episodes at the end is included in that batch that we see kneeling down to Vader at the end as well. So really tying in all these loose threads of Lucasfilm properties into one cohesive, I guess, story here as you're watching this here. When you're fighting the like, is this an important story? Is this canon? You're like, okay, yeah, I see these beats here that make sense. This is my favorite episode of this arc here, because this is arguably, I would say, the most juicy in terms of like, oh, okay, that's how they do this, right? And it does make sense, right? I feel like the answer is like sometimes the obvious answer is the best answer sometimes. Like I think fandom tries to outsmart itself rather than just saying like, yeah, what's on the table here is arguably what should be the way it's done. If they were going to have Inquisitors, right, these dark side agents, it would be some sort of trial by combat process. That does track for me. Like, why would they do? Like, they wouldn't do a math test. They would just say, all right, we're having tryouts and we've got room for one of you here, and this circle is going to implode in on itself until one of you emerges on the other end.
We don't know what the Jedi trials are, to be fair. I'm like, we didn't see, Obi-Wan says in the Phantom Menace, I'm ready for the trials. And you're like, I don't know what the trials are. Here's
super
a
arbitrary. Yeah.
Here's a couple of Padawans. Hey, only got one slot there for Qui-Gon.
I think the last trial is forging the lightsaber, right? So like, technically that's one of the last ones. Maybe it's not the last one, because obviously it's to become the next stage of Padawan, I guess. It's one of the
It's a
trials along
percentage
the
of
way.
your final grade. Put it that
Yeah,
way.
that's right. For sure. Can you make it out of Ilum?
Do
And
they use a weighted GPA or not? That's just the
totally. Yeah, Gungi got an extra 0.25% on his weight there, for being, there aren't too many Wookiee Jedis. So I thought it was neat to see this process here. I found it interesting that from a character perspective, I guess in like, because so much time has passed and like headcanon is a major thing, right? You start to fill in those gaps along the way. And as a fandom, I think this is where we get into our touch points of problems, is because we create these stories when they don't exist. And then when we get those stories, sometimes we have to combat our own selves to be like, oh, can I accept what they've given me versus what I've created in my head the entirety of the way, right? I'm looking at you, Phantom Menace. And for this case, right, I feel like in my head I thought, oh, it would make sense that she would be an Inquisitor, yes. But it seems like there's like an animosity from her at the start here already, of like, I'm just kind of in here because the stormtroopers literally led me out from the jail cell, brought me here, and they assumed I would be willing to go with this from the start here based off of how I concluded my relationship with the Jedi here. Whereas I guess in my head I thought, oh man, she'd be really gung-ho for this. Anything that's like, take it to the man, the Jedi are the problem. But it's realized, I guess, in just my own counseling here afterwards, her problems were not necessarily with the Jedi alone, but with the larger Republic too, and the problems facing that. And then she was arguably one of the first people to see through the lines of, you just changed colors or you changed symbols, right? The former Republic that existed just became the Empire overnight, and it's still the same problems that existed, if not more of, with the Republic than now with the Empire, now that you have a single dictator ruling over everything here. So as we're already talking through this, I'm enjoying this a lot more than when I was originally sitting down with like these episodes again, revisiting them.
Well, as we know, nothing with the algorithms are by chance, and so all of a sudden, earlier this morning, I had the Anakin Ahsoka meeting in the Ahsoka series, episode 5.
I think 5. Yeah,
I want to say, and then when they kind of start the flashbacks, and in that very first one where this was our first battle together, and she's like, are you just training me to be a soldier? And this sort of like this question of like, are you going to live or are you going to die? And it's an interesting parallel between the two, because here's Barriss, who was part of what kind of drove her, was this questioning of like, is this all we're supposed to, this is not what we're supposed to do.
Right.
And so I can take that step with going, well, okay, you're pointing a gun at me, I better go with here. But I can kind of see it. She doesn't. It's one of those where it's not like a turn. Like all of a sudden, Anakin's turn in Revenge of the Sith is almost a little harder of a turn than this, where it's a slippery slope, and she gets to where like, all right, but you can already see by the end of the episode, she's like, I'm in. I don't know if I'm down with this, but it is a survival thing.
Yeah, I got to make it to tomorrow.
Exactly. So, and I think that leads into into the second episode. I think it's a nice, smoother transition.
Got it. Well, let's get into that transition here, right? That second episode, as you noted, kind of represents her rejection of the Inquisitorius and their destructive ways in support of the Empire. I guess following up on what you're kind of alluding to here, it sounds like you are kind of you didn't think that this was so quick of a turn versus how the 2 15-minute episodes maybe suggest here.
Right. Well, at the very beginning, she's like, hey, I read, everybody's kind of reading the briefs, and she's kind of questioning is it the fourth sister?
Fourth sister, yes.
And I like the back and forth of it because it's very similar to what a Padawan and a master goes. But I think it's pretty easy. Like you can see them taking two different turns. They're going down to the village, and while the fourth sister is basically, pinning everybody on up against the wall.
Mm-hmm.
Here's Barriss that's kind of going after the kid. Now, in some cases, it almost kind of in Sith way, because it's like he's going to be an easier mark, right? And you're like, something, come on. But it's still her, right? It's not where she's acting. She genuinely like, look, just tell us what you want. And in the same later on when she's dealing with what I'm assuming to be another Padawan. I don't know if that was a a Jedi Knight, or whether it was that where, you can clearly say, like, hey, you don't have to be tired, you can come with, and
Mm-hmm.
some of that is very Sith-like, and it does kind of, lead you down to where it's, like I said, it's a very slippery slope. It's a very, you can get to A from B pretty easy, but
Got it.
you can kind of see when, of course, the fourth sister whacks the entire, the village, or the village folks in there. And then, it's interesting that she didn't end up killing the kid. She
Correct. Yep.
did, she did look around, and it was like, all right, you're not completely, you know, it's interesting because, I mean, her reaction to it was like, all right, that's, she even herself was like, knew that it was probably pushing it.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess they're always kind of looking over their shoulder, waiting for, like, that's how you make rank in the
Got it.
Inquisitorius, is you wait for somebody. It's kind of like that Star Trek mirror, where they're like, everybody goes up in rank.
Mm-hmm.
But I thought, I thought everybody felt believable. I wasn't taken out of that as far as her turn, and we're not really quite sure how much time has elapsed. Maybe.
Correct. Yeah, it could have been 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. Who knows, right? But yeah, it's a to your point there. Yeah, it's a quota system for the Inquisitorius. They have to meet a certain number of Jedi brought in, I guess, before they can advance to.
Doesn't make sense in that world either.
How do you get to be a Grand Inquisitor, right? What do you need to do for that kind of promotion? Who knows? But yeah, this episode just shows the dastardly nature of the Empire and the lengths that they'll go to in order to enact fear and create hate and anger across the galaxy, because that's what they feed on. And the Fourth Sister is just continually feeding on this, and I think this is the breaking point for Barriss, obviously, I think. But as we alluded to, those kind of like threads of, oh, I don't know if this is really for me, is kind of hinted at from even arguably her in the jail cell, where she might have been just comfortable staying in that jail cell the rest of all of the story of Star Wars as we know it, or as long as her life exists in this canon world. So, but then she's thrust into this, and then she makes the choice ultimately where she's like, "Hey, I really can't be a part of this anymore. this is a stretch here for all of us here. I even knew you, Fourth Sister," and she calls her her real name all the time as a jab. Lynn, yes. She's like, Lynn, she stop calling me that. Stop calling me that. I'm no longer that. He's like, you're still there. As we'll see in episode 3. Yeah, so I think at first, that when I first watched these episodes, I think I was like, oh yes, so the character I thought would be ultimate, like almost like right hand to, if Vader is the right hand to the Emperor, this could have potentially been a right hand character to Vader in my head. Is ultimately like, nah, I'm something else, right? I'm not you guys evil for the sake of being evil. I was doing something to expose things, and you misread the tea leaves in assuming that I would be 100% in your camp here, or forcing me to be in your camp like you did with others, because they feel like they have no way out of this here, and I'll play along until I find my opportunity. And she found her opportunity and took it. So that, again, maybe with time, that was a good thing here that I didn't record an episode 3 years ago, because that would have been maybe my critique, is like, oh wow, I built up all this animosity and this feeling of like, oh, this character is maybe the ultimate evil in the galaxy here, and instead, no, I get a more nuanced approach to this, which arguably, now that we're talking about, is helpful in a different sense.
Well, and goes back to, our discussion on, Tales versus Rebuilding the Galaxy versus Visions. Like, you can go back to these Tales ones, and even if it's an arc or an episode that you're not very hot on, you can pick up stuff. And I think it's subtle, where I think in some cases, where if you get some of these what if type stories, it maybe is harder to revisit. I mean, revisiting just to kind of get through, because especially in Rebuilding, where there's a lot of cameos.
Yeah.
And in Visions, where
Cameo
you've got a lot of,
right?
right, I know. And in Visions, where there's a lot of world building in a very short time, and you have to kind of go through. These ones are more, you can kind of go back and see these little subtle little beats. And and like I said, if we're all kind of building our our shelf of canon, as it were, because no one's, very few have finished it all. It is nice to go, okay, that has deepened my knowledge of this, and maybe I want to go back, and I know that there's a new story on the Inquisitors, and all that, where I just haven't had a chance to, ingest it, whether it's an audiobook, whether it's a book, a comic. There's all this out there, and then you can kind of take that little nugget of the universe and
That's right.
chew on a little more.
That's right. I did forget that there's that new, relatively newer book, probably the last 3 years, right? That Rise of the Red Blade, about the Inquisitor or Inquisitorius program by Delilah S. Dawson, that maybe fleshes out a bit more of this organization than it sounds like neither of us have read it, so maybe a book club in the future can give us some more insights on that one. But yeah, there's more to chew on this group over the years that it exists. I guess I assume it stops by the time the Empire collapses, but who knows? Maybe it forms its own side Knights of Ren kind of team or something like that roams the galaxy. Who knows?
Well, what did we find out with the Ben Solo project? That, or at least there was another thing that someone had said, that the Stranger would have ended up being one of the first Knights
Leslie
of Ren,
Headland even. And I'm like, yes, sign me up for it. That tracks, right? Like, he would have been cast aside eventually by Plagueis for Palpatine, or if he was even a part of the system, like, who knows? What could have been? Renew the Acolyte. Come on, guys, help us out here. I need more. What, Kofar Jedi too? We need more of him. Who is that? Your favorite Jedi from that off-world planet that would just kind of exist in there with the guy that was in the Barash Vow in like episode 2 or something like that.
Oh geez, I don't even remember now.
Anywho,
I was too busy finding my my May adorable. I found
see? Look at that good stuff here.
Series 3 of the with Adorables has a lot of Andor and Acolyte love in it. So.
Well, maybe with that love, that it will show Disney that there's interest in renewing the show,
at least
or
at the $7.99 level. At least at the I was gathering too many Death Stars from their first couple of runs. So I was like, these are stackable. I like it. These little containers are stackable.
Well, the monetary value is there. So if we buy enough of those, then they'll have enough budget to make a second season. So, anywho, renew the Acolyte. Moving on to the final episode of this story here. It features an older Barriss who is now like a wise healer, helping with Force-sensitive children and their families. And this effort brings her to a final showdown with the Force sister, also known as Lynn. And seemingly the Force sister turns her back on the Empire through this altercation that happens within the episode, and the episode does end on some sort of like cliffhanger, in being like, what happens to Barriss, what happens to the Force sister. What do you, Greg, make of this ending? Do you think that Barriss survives? What about the fourth sister? What takes place next here? Because like, now we've gotten that cliffhanger of Barriss years ago. Now we have technically another one that's been outstanding for about 3 years now.
I love the twist, in the fact that, at the very early, the fourth sister talks about, fear being our ally, and then Barriss kind of twists it, on its head, going, are you fighting against it, or is it helping you? But I like the allegory, like, you're not going to find your way out of here. She already knew, and which told me that, during her time as a healer, she really developed a fuller knowledge of the Force. And you can kind of see at this point, whereas the Inquisitorius early on is very powerful, at this point, she doesn't need a blade to take her on. She knows exactly, like, her movements are very predictable.
Yeah.
And, it's interesting. Now, did Barriss know that she was going to get, a lightsaber barrel in the chest? I don't know if she went in there thinking that, but it's interesting that even though she was a healer, she probably, I don't know if she could heal herself, or she would have needed some of Lynn's essence to maybe heal. But I like the fact that they didn't spell it out. There are times where it's just really very, very nice. And I like how it kind of ended, and, both of their journeys, who knows? And I think that was a nice way to kind of end. Everybody kind of wins in that one, because, Barriss has kind of finished her journey. I like her parting with that. And I think also it's interesting when she's talking to the parents going, hey, look, in the old days, seeing that parallel between like the Jedi would have come and taken your child,
Yep.
and the Empire would, and now the Empire's doing it. And it's kind of like, yeah, it does sort of question still, like, yes, it's for the greater good, but this is an awesome sacrifice that parents have to make to go, we're trusting that the Jedi would take our child and they would be, they would, it's the best thing for all parties involved. Or, in this case where it's like, we have to protect the children from what the Empire will do to the kids.
Yeah.
But I really liked this episode as well. And I thought, like I said, the maze, there's a lot of, deeper meaning in this. And I thought it was really nice.
Yeah, I like that too. I like that she's seemingly a part of the past that's introduced in Kenobi. So I think that's a really cool way to keep that through line going. Because I think there's so many people out there that are now pushing for like I need a path TV show. Like there's a lot to chew off of that. Who's all connected to it? Where does it lead to? Who are the folks along the way that guide people along these journeys here? How many not Jedi, but how many Force sensitive kids and cool, interesting stories are out there because of this? And this just adds more to that bucket by which people can pull from for that matter here. And I too agree that I think the allegory of the cave and the maze, right, is super interesting with this too, allowing kind of Lynn to reflect upon herself and to face her own problems and fears and insecurities, right, through this sense. I thought it was really eloquently done. The animation is perfect in the way that it executes this, and it ultimately leads to this like really like the tragedy of the dark side, right, is like you take and you take and you take until you can't take no more, and then you're left with the consequences of your choices and your actions, right? And then that's just kind of that suffering that is left at the end of the tone poem, right? That Yoda spits out in the Phantom Menace, right? It leads to suffering. And Lynn is at that point of suffering there at the end where she literally has this person that believes in her and she stabs her with a lightsaber, and she's been hunting her down in the bane of her existence, right? Because she's found this inner peace and become peace with herself, and doesn't need to be a part of this group enacting hate and anger upon the galaxy. She chooses otherwise. She chooses to be something different, a force for good perhaps, or just at least not a part of this group that's literally spewing out hate and anger across the galaxy and destroying villages and tearing people from their families and murdering people on the spot, or taking them to a planet near Mustafar and interrogating them, right? Whatever the Inquisitors are doing at that time in their full capacity. And, she has that victory of overcoming herself and her demons, but it's also a hollow victory too, in the fact that like she might not have her friend to guide her on her journey anymore, and she's all alone again because of this, and she has to rebuild the pieces again. But that is a tragic poetic ending to this tale here of just like, how many times can you keep being a force for evil instead of a force for good, and having energy to pull from the well of those that you take from you, right? Eventually you're going to bottom out on that, and then you hit rock bottom and you have to rebuild again, and that takes time and energy to do so. All right, Greg, we are at my last question here. We've talked extensively about these episodes here. I think we've about mined all that we can from them at this point. They're pretty quick, maybe 12 minutes per episode, so I think we've covered all of them at length here. If there are future iterations of the Tales series, and I'm looking at you next May 4th as as it seems like that's the date that they keep pushing these out at. Hopefully there's not like 13 other properties releasing at the same time that causes it to be lost in the sauce, if you will. If there are future iterations of this series, which character would you like to see featured and why?
It's an interesting question. If they are not going to go back to one of the Tales of, so let's just say that, we're going to do something other than Tales of the Jedi, Tales of the Empire, Tales of the Underworld. You could go Tales of the Republic.
Okay.
Speaking of Acolyte, I think that there would be some interesting ground there, because we're not going to get season 2, that you could, maybe talk about Khmer's early parts
Mm,
in the Jedi Order. That'd be very easy, and I think pretty much on the nose as far as like there's a character we could see a nice three, and you could bring him even back.
got it.
Um, the voice actor for. I know that if you want to split hairs, Tales of the Jabba's Palace would also be kind of in Tales of the
Sure.
Underworld, but I know that I think they did that in a comic series back in the day as well.
I think a book
That would be
too. Yeah.
something. Yeah. Tales of the Resistance, where you could go back. Doesn't sound like anybody's interested in doing any kind of sequel trilogy stuff. So maybe you can take some of that Hunt for Ben Solo stuff.
Mm-hmm.
No, I don't think they're going to go there. But that would be something. It'd be kind of fun to see. Anything on like any of the sequel characters where you have like Finn or um, Poe would be interesting, or maybe if you had took an adventure with the Tico sisters, there'd be another thing. I know that they did some comics on that as well, but I Tales of the Droids, where is a droid specific adventure? Hey, why not have a C-3PO and R2-D2 adventure or something like that? They did the Droids series as well. Tales of the Ewoks, it's just nothing but them talking in Ewok and nobody knows. They're not even going to caption it. That'd be awesome. It'd just be like,
That'd be
but
great.
but what in the Visions, the Ronin sequel where there was
Yes,
the
there was some
Ewoks
Ewok.
on the.
Yep.
I thought that was adorable. I'm like, all right, this is actually kind of cool. So maybe you just have one of those, and for 3 episodes, we're just like tearing out our heads, going, "What the heck are they talking about?" But that would be some things that I think there's endless stories to mine. But if you want to carry on, I like them using this platform to tell stories, and like I said, some hit a little more on
Yeah.
me than others, but that's fine. And I'm just happy that they do them. And it's a nice way. You've got that animation style that can't be that expensive to produce. And people like this. And so, and it's canon, right? It's a little bit of canon
That's right.
stories. So.
That's right. Short vignettes that give us some more juicy details about characters that we may or may not have asked for. That, it's only a short 30-40 minute time commitment to watch these in full. And you have a great time at the end of it. You might learn
Exactly.
a thematical element or two, right? Or maybe it's like the Dooku episodes where you're like, wow, there's a lot of
Mm-hmm.
interesting stuff in that one per se. Like that's the gold standard of these perhaps moving forward. And or you can explain like how Asajj Ventress comes back. That people think that the character is maybe dead, or just reintroducing the character, right? Like you can tell these interesting stories that don't require the grand scale or scope of a full on maybe TV series project or a full live action thing of sorts. Right. Nothing of that needed. They already have the animation, as you noted. It can't be too expensive. They need to feed a machine that is keeping people subscribed. And
Exactly.
Star Wars is a big IP to mine, so there's a lot of stories to tell in this avenue.
Exactly. And I think I was listening to David Motters of Star Wars Reactions talk about that he had finished up that arc, the Asajj Ventress arc, and then met Nika Fetterman the next day at Ocala Comic Con, and then he ended up with her banner. So he was just like, I can't believe this. And I thought, what a great story. But there's so many of these great voice actors out there
Yeah,
that getting them back in the universe, I don't care how you do it, is always very pleasing, and everybody kind of enjoys it. So
that's
long
right.
live Tales of series.
Long live the Tales of series, and please just space out the release dates for these things.
Thank you. Please.
That's
Thank you.
that's
Please
all
and
we
thank you.
ask for. Not even just as podcasters, but as consumers of this. We want to watch it, but we also want to watch it with its like space and time so that we can enjoy it and digest it appropriately. But that's a gripe
Exactly.
for a different day, and we've griped about it quite a lot over the last couple of months here. But anywho, Greg, thank you for pinch hitting on this episode here on short
No problem.
notice, and for rewatching these on short order. And it was great chatting with you about these episodes and for concluding our Tales of the Empire discussions here on the podcast. You run a podcast yourself, Rebel Base Card. Where can the folks find you? What are the cool things you've been doing recently on there? Tell us about your show.
Well, if you liked us talking, then you're actually going to love my brand new episode, because you're on it talking about HalseyCon. That was a fun discussion. We've had a bunch of news on the Tops front, especially with basketball being released, with Star Wars Galaxy Chrome. There was a pre-order for it. It's expensive, but it's going to be coming up in the card trader app pretty soon. NBA Collect, another app from the same Topps Digital brand, is going to come out. And then I keep going to cons, and so Warrior Con is a local one that comes up. I was talking to you about it because it's in one of the main township high schools here, and then of which Maine North, which is no longer an active high school, is where they filmed The Breakfast Club back in the day. And so now it's a state police building, but it's still got that same facade. And Shermer High School, I think it was. But yeah, and then we have the Chicago Sports Spectacular. So there's card shows and things almost every weekend. And so I think that it's just a microcosm of the year where it's just been con after con. I know you are much more disciplined than I am. Probably better off not going to so many, but but some of these are in my backyard, and it's kind of fun. And usually the cost is down. So a lot of times it's fun to kind of poke your head around and kind of give people an idea of what's going on. But yeah, we also have Second Breakfast also coming up. We've been going back over the Andor season 2. I know we'll be getting you on one of these. I think we had P.T. McNiff from The Long Take, along with Greg Cass and I, revisiting Harvest, which was a great episode to talk about again. That'll be coming out soon. So a lot of good content as we make our slow march towards episode 200 of a 300 plus episode run. But the main show is going to be hopefully hitting episode 200 before the end of the year. And I've got some audio that I haven't had a chance to put out there. So it might be a nice little compilation type episode, but it's going to be busy as we kind of get into trying to get done before the holidays kind of take really full hold, and everybody kind of, we're trying to get you folks some something to listen to while you're hopefully waiting in a shorter line through TSA, or you're in a long car ride to your relative's place.
Yeah, fingers crossed, right? That's always the hope, is that people listen to the shows when they're in transit.
When everybody's sitting at home, no one's listening to podcasts, so it's like get your stuff done, and then have that nice little break before Steam. I think Steam into the Storyverse. Tom Gross over there at Washington Community High School, they got the announcement. They're gonna branch away from just Star Wars and do kind of a multiverse kind of thing, where you've got D&D, you've got Harry Potter, and you got Marvel as well as Star Wars. And so I do some of their badge design work, and so I've got to kind of come up with some I got to broaden the palette of things in order to do that. So it's going to be a short break, and then 2026 is going to kind of kick in with a bang.
Oh, wow. Well, yeah. Were you telling me people don't just listen around the campfire to podcasts anymore? With their loved ones?
It's the
holidays?
right weather for a campfire, because you're going to need the fire to keep warm. But yes, it depends on where that campfire is. Hopefully it's in someone's car, or while someone's doing some errands, so they can listen to both.
Well, I'm of the mind of let's start a new trend here. And folks, if you're just hanging out with your family at the holiday season, turn on your favorite podcast and just introduce them, whether willingly or unwillingly, to what you're listening to. And maybe that's how we can introduce new people to the Rebel Base Card and Forest Ghost Conversations, perhaps. Sharing is caring, and tell your friends and family about your favorite podcasts over the holiday season. Your favorite podcasts will appreciate it, as hopefully they generate new listeners. That ultimately helps us keep the lights on for all these things here, even though we're still gonna talk about these fun properties into our microphones, whether people are listening or not. Well, Greg, this has been a blast chatting with you. Of course, you always have a revolving door on being a guest on the show, so I'm sure we'll be in contact very soon here. And folks, for listening, thank you very much for participating in our conversations on Tales of the Empire. And guess what? Next week we have another brand new episode for you, and it's going to be a fun one. I'm just going to tease you on that one for that point here. So nothing further on that front yet to announce, but it's going to be a good one. So just be ready for that. And thanks again for listening. May the Force be with you. Take care.